Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. There's something, well, inherently powerful, isn't there, about wanting to know where we come from?
Hmm.
That primal human desire to trace our roots, to piece together the fragments of lives lived long before us. There's a real thrill in discovering a new ancestor, right? A new branch on the tree, confirmation of a family story.
Oh, absolutely. That moment of connection is fantastic.
But what if I told you that sometimes the most exciting discoveries, the ones that really unlock profound insights, aren't those neat confirmations at all?
Hmm.
What if they are, in fact, startling, kind of head-scratching contradictions?
Indeed. It's truly counterintuitive for many, but those moments of friction, those records that just don't seem to fit,
Yeah,
they're often the very signals that you're about to unearth something really significant. You shouldn't dismiss them. You need to flag them.
absolutely. So today, we're plunging into the fascinating, sometimes, let's be honest, frustrating, but ultimately incredibly rewarding world of genealogical inconsistencies.
It definitely can be frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, but we're not just looking at what these inconsistencies are. We want to explore how to recognize them as vital clues and, critically, why embracing them is the absolute key to truly understanding your past.
Right. It's a whole different way of looking at roadblocks.
Exactly. Our mission for you today is really to transform your perspective on those roadblock records. We'll show you how to treat conflicting information not as some error to be dismissed or ignored.
Which is tempting, I know.
Oh, totally. But instead, see it as an explicit invitation to a deeper, richer understanding of your ancestors.
And we're going to illustrate this with a really powerful real-world example, straight from our source material.
Can't wait for that.
We'll explore why these surprising facts can lead to the most profound aha moments, the kind that shift your entire understanding of your family's story.
Okay, so our insights for this deep dive, they come from a very specific and insightful set of documents. We're looking at excerpts from Mastering Genealogical Inconsistencies.
A very apt title.
And also Whispers of the Heart, an anthology of love's echoes. Both of these give us a crucial framework and that compelling case study. That comes directly from the Tennessee State Library and Archives.
That's right, a fantastic resource.
So prepare to have your assumptions challenged, because the path to truth in genealogy, well, it often begins with a question mark, not an exclamation point. Okay, so let's dive into this fundamental shift in mindset. Our natural inclination when we're doing any kind of research, especially something so personal like family history, is to seek confirmation, right? We want to find records that back up what we already believe or what grandma told us.
Yeah, we want that validation.
But our sources challenge that right from the start. They tell us it's actually a good practice to refrain from drawing conclusions until every avenue of research has been exhausted.
That's huge.
It's a massive mindset shift, isn't it? For someone just starting out, or even, a seasoned genealogist, that can feel like you're constantly second-guessing yourself.
It truly is. But what's fascinating here is that the very things that make you question your opinion, the records that are not consistent with your current findings or theories,
Yeah.
those are actually indicators of success.
Yeah.
They are signals that you're on the right track, that you're uncovering something new, something potentially more accurate, rather than just validating what you already believe.
Okay, so it's like the opposite of what you'd normally think.
Exactly. Think of it this way. When you hit a conflicting birth date, or maybe a different spouse's name than you expected, your first instinct might be, frustration. Ugh, another problem.
Definitely.
But our sources teach us to see that frustration as a red flag, or maybe better, a green flag, indicating a breakthrough might be just around the corner.
A green flag, I
Right.
like that.
So when you find that conflicting piece of data, don't just delete it or dismiss it. Circle it, flag it, make a note, and ask yourself, okay, what new truth might this be trying to show me? What new questions does this open up? That's really your first key insight into mastering these inconsistencies.
I think about that feeling, How do you, listening right now, feel when something you thought was settled, a fact you'd maybe relied on for years in your family tree, suddenly gets shaken up by some new piece of information?
It can be jarring.
Totally. I remember when I was convinced my great-grandmother was born in this one specific town, family lore and everything. Then I found a later census record suggesting a completely different state.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that gut punch of, oh no, I was wrong. Our sources suggest that feeling of doubt, that moment of questioning, is actually a profoundly positive sign in genealogical research.
It really is.
It means you're being led to a new layer of understanding, pushing you past your initial assumptions.
Precisely. It forces you to move beyond just superficial acceptance and engage in real critical thinking. And this leads us straight into acknowledging the inherent, well, spottiness of historical records.
Bodiness, yeah.
The fundamental challenge of genealogy is our reliance on historical documents and other people's memories. We often kind of idealize these sources, right?
Yeah.
Treating them like infallible truth.
Guilty as charged sometimes.
We all are, but they are far from perfect.
And it's not really anyone's fault, is it? I mean, think about it. Human fallibility is just constant.
It is.
Memories decay over time, even for people who lived through the events. It's like that game of telephone across generations.
That's a great analogy.
How many times have we misremembered something from last week, let alone decades ago?
Exactly.
Then you add in things like transcription errors, a clerk mishearing a name, writing Baker instead of Barker, maybe.
Or do bad handwriting.
Oh, yeah, or Elizabeth for Eliza, or just, like you said, sloppy handwriting leading to misinterpretations. And then there are intentional omissions, too.
Right. That's a big one.
People often had compelling reasons to hide certain facts, didn't they? Especially sensitive stuff like out-of-wedlock births or prior marriages or even criminal records because of, social stigmas or legal issues back then.
Absolutely. These omissions aren't necessarily malicious. They're just a reality of historical data collection and human nature.
Yeah.
And this point is crucial. Even accounts shared by individuals who lived during the same era can become, as the source says, tainted with time.
Tainted with time?
They might have had different perspectives, maybe incomplete information, or they just plain forgot details. Think about it. One child might remember a family event completely differently than an aunt or an older sibling.
Oh, for sure. It happens all the time in families.
So knowing this inherent unreliability, how do we approach this information knowing it might be incomplete or flawed? It encourages a mindset of active investigation, critical evaluation.
Not just passive acceptance.
Exactly. Rather than passively accepting whatever is written down first. You become more like a detective, constantly weighing evidence, looking for corroboration.
Instead of just a collector of facts.
Precisely. And this raises an important question. What happens when your carefully constructed narrative, your story, is contradicted by a new piece of information that seems, equally valid?
Right. That detective mindset is absolutely key. And it leads directly into this idea of the impermanence of fact in genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
Our sources stress a vital instruction here. Gather all the evidence and pass the baton. I love that phrase.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. Share your interpretation of your findings, but do not lead the next generation into believing everything you share is a cold, hard, and irrefutable fact.
That's a really powerful statement about, humility in research.
It really is. It means acknowledging that your family tree is less of a finished blueprint and more like a living, evolving hypothesis.
It is. It's about being responsible custodians of the information you find.
Yeah.
You're building a narrative, sure, maybe a theory, based on the best available evidence at that moment.
Right, at that moment.
But you have to acknowledge that new evidence can and often will emerge to refine or even totally contradict that narrative. This is the essence of what our sources call the one-word record phenomenon.
The one-word record. Okay.
This concept basically means that even a single, seemingly tiny piece of data can act like a fulcrum, shifting the entire weight of your understanding.
Wow.
It only takes the discovery of one single detail, like, quote, one more child born out of wedlock or a different spouse in the home, to change the whole course of events in your family history.
So finding a marriage record for an ancestor that lists a totally different spouse before the one you knew about.
Exactly. Or a baptismal record for a child you never even knew existed. Each of these small details can unravel years of assumptions, forcing a complete reevaluation.
That phrase really resonated with me. You are always on the cusp of that occurrence. And also, who knows everything about their ancestors like they thought they did when they started? I mean, seriously, who among us started their genealogy journey thinking they had it all figured out?
Nobody.
Only to find out the story was far more complex, probably messier, but infinitely more interesting. That feeling of always being on the verge of a new revelation, that even your most solid findings could be shaken up. It keeps the research perpetually exciting, doesn't it?
It does. It's like you've built this beautiful, intricate house of cards, maybe.
Yeah.
And then a new breeze comes along, a new record surfaces, and you realize you have to rebuild it, maybe even stronger and more accurately this time, with better foundations.
I like that image. It speaks to the dynamic nature of history itself, I think.
Exactly. It's not some static monument. It's a living, breathing story that continues to be illuminated by new discoveries.
And speaking of discoveries, DNA.
Ah, yes.
DNA.
In an ideal scenario, right, in a perfect world, all our compiled research would stand the test of the length of DNA testing. The ultimate arbiter. The scientific proof.
Well, in theory, yes. DNA offers a level of certainty that historical documents often just can't match.
Right.
However, our sources are quick to point out that that is not possible in every case.
Why not? There are countless reasons why DNA evidence might not be available or conclusive for certain lines or time periods. Maybe the relevant direct lines died out, no descendants left to test, or the necessary testing hasn't been done by those crucial distant cousins yet. Or maybe the genetic connections are simply too distant, beyond 4 or 5 generations back, to be definitively proven with current methods.
Gotcha.
And furthermore, DNA can reveal unexpected truths, like non-paternity events.
Where the presumed father isn't the biological father.
Right. Or hidden adoptions, which completely alter a genealogical line, as understood through the paper trail. These are often the most challenging inconsistencies to reconcile, precisely because DNA is so powerful and often feels irrefutable.
So even with this incredible tool, there are limitations. And sometimes it actually creates more inconsistencies than it solves, at least initially.
It certainly can, especially emotionally.
Yeah, how do we as researchers navigate that emotional landscape when DNA shatters a long-held family narrative?
Well, it requires a really delicate balance, I think. Accepting the biological truth while still respecting the family's historical and emotional truth as it was understood for generations.
That makes sense.
However, despite these limitations, the sources insist that this does not mean you should not take your research nor the interpretation of your findings seriously.
Okay.
It's still about thoroughness, rigor, and responsibility in how you present your findings, even when that perfect world validation through DNA just isn't an option.
So the paper trail still matters immensely.
Absolutely. And this raises an important question. How do we balance that desire for scientific certainty, which DNA offers, with the realities of historical record keeping, which are often incomplete, ambiguous, or even misleading? It reminds us that our careful interpretation and diligent pursuit of evidence still holds significant weight and value, even without that absolute biological confirmation. You're building a compelling case, not just presenting a simple verdict. Hashtag tag tweet practical strategies for uncovering and leveraging new clues.
Okay, so if fact is sort of impermanent and inconsistencies are actually our best friends, what does that mean for our practical approach? How do we actually do genealogy day to day?
Right. Let's get practical.
Our sources tackle this head on with what I kind of like to call the never finished line of research. It's so easy, isn't it, with all the historical records available online today, to feel like you've finished with certain lines.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You've got your ancestors documented, their families, their dates. You put a little mental check mark next to them in your software, maybe.
It's a very common feeling, that sense of completion. We tell ourselves, okay, I've exhausted all the sources for this branch.
On there.
We all have. But the source provides crucial counter-advice here. Records that were not available at the time of previous research should be reviewed.
Ah, okay. So it's about going back.
It's a powerful call for continuous engagement with evolving resources. Think about it. Data sets are constantly being digitized by archives, new indexes are being created all the time, more records are being released as privacy laws expire.
Like the 1950 census recently.
Exactly. And research techniques themselves are improving. What wasn't online or indexed 5 years ago or even last year might be easily accessible today. What was only on microfilm in some distant archive might now be searchable from your couch.
Okay, let's unpack this. How many of us listening right now have a pile of finished family trees, neatly organized and put away somewhere?
Probably most of us.
Our sources are basically telling us it's time to go back. It's time to pull those finished lines out and give them another look, because the landscape of available records is constantly shifting beneath our feet.
That's the key takeaway. Never assume finished means finished.
So where do we start with this re-examination? What should we focus on?
Good question. And the sources are quite specific about the types of records we should prioritize for re-examination, because these are common places where inconsistencies tend to hide in plain sight.
Okay.
They list newer census records, and when they say newer, it might surprise some people. This could mean censuses previously unreleased due to privacy laws, like that 1950 example.
Right.
But even older census records that you might have looked at years ago could now have better indexing. Or maybe you have more knowledge now and might spot new clues you missed before.
That's a good point. Your own skills improve. So what specific kinds of technical details within census records are really prone to inconsistency, and why are they so crucial to re-examine?
Oh, census records are absolute gold mines for subtle inconsistencies. You really need to look closely.
Like what?
Well, shifting ages, for starters. Look for the same individual across different census years. If an ancestor is listed as, say, 25 in 1880, then maybe 40 in 1890, and then 50 in 1900, those age discrepancies aren't always just errors. They could be clues. Maybe they were trying to conceal their true age for some reason, or perhaps the informant was just unsure.
Interesting.
Pay attention to varying birthplaces listed for children in the same family. That might indicate migrations you weren't aware of, or even potentially different parentage if the mother moved before marriage. Also, really look at the relationships listed for everyone in the household, those boarders, lodgers, or servants. Sometimes they might actually be unacknowledged relatives.
Yeah, okay.
Especially in communities where families really supported each other closely. These slight variations, these little inconsistencies, can be indicators of hidden relationships or significant life events.
Wow, okay. That's a deep dive just into census records. What about vital records? Are sources really highlight death records as particularly powerful?
Yes, death records are pivotal.
Why death records specifically? What makes them so potent for uncovering these things?
Well, think about it. A death record from, say, 1941, as the source notes, can still reveal information about a person's ancestral line 2 and 3 generations back.
2 or 3 generations from one death record.
Potentially, yes. A death certificate typically asks for the deceased's name, their parents' names, crucially, including the mother's maiden name, their birthplace, marital status, and often the name and relationship of the informant.
Right. All that key info.
These documents are usually created relatively close to the time of death, so the information provided is often considered quite reliable, especially if the informant is a direct relative like a spouse or child.
Makes sense.
So, for example, a death certificate might list a maiden name for the mother that was completely unknown to you before. Or it might list a father's name that totally contradicts all your prior findings, which is exactly what we'll see in our case study later.
Okay, setting the stage.
This single document can provide names and places that open up entirely new avenues of research for previous generations. It acts as a critical bridge backward in time.
So on death records, what kinds of inconsistencies should we be looking for specifically?
Well, beyond the parentage, which is obviously key, look for discrepancies in birth dates or birthplaces, especially if the informant might have been less familiar with the deceased's really early life, maybe a grandchild providing info.
Okay.
Pay close attention to the informant's relationship listed.
Yeah.
Is it a spouse, a child, a sibling, or maybe just a friend or neighbor?
Does that matter?
It can. An informant who isn't immediate family might have secondhand information, making details like parents' names potentially more prone to error or even omission.
Good point.
Also, sometimes a death record might hint at a previous marriage. Maybe it lists a maiden name for a woman that isn't consistent with her current husband's surname. Or perhaps it mentions a prior spouse.
Little clues?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the burial location, too, can be a massive clue, linking individuals to specific geographical family groups or cemeteries you didn't know about.
That's incredible. It really is like a time capsule of information linking directly to the past. And beyond vital records, the sources also point us towards county or parish records.
Yes, don't overlook those.
For listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly are these and what makes them unique for unearthing inconsistencies?
County or parish records are those local-level documents that often capture incredibly specific and sometimes unique details that might just not appear in broader federal or state records.
Like the really local stuff.
Exactly. They're often overlooked, maybe harder to access sometimes, but they can be absolute treasure troves for inconsistencies. Think about probate files.
Wills and estates.
Right. These detail the distribution of an estate after someone's death. Look for disputes among the heirs mentions of missing heirs, or specific bequests to individuals who aren't immediately obvious family members. Sometimes a will might even acknowledge an out-of-wedlock child, maybe indirectly. Or land divisions within the estate could reveal complex family relationships, stepchildren, or even disputes over inheritance that shed light on hidden family dynamics.
Okay, what else?
Land deeds. these record property transactions. Inconsistencies here might include aliases used by individuals.
People using different names.
Yeah, or sudden sales during periods of financial distress, or property being transferred between family members in unusual ways. For example, you might find a woman selling land without her husband's formal consent, which could indicate a separation or perhaps a previous marriage where she retained rights. Court minutes are another big one. These are records of local court proceedings. Divorce records, obviously. Guardianship hearings for minor children. Or things like bastardy bonds.
What are those?
Documents holding a man financially responsible for supporting an illegitimate child. These are incredibly direct evidence of family disruptions, hidden parentage, or formal changes in status or name.
Very direct indeed.
And finally, don't forget church registers. While not strictly county records, these local parish records for baptisms, marriages, and burials often provide more precise dates than censuses. And crucially, they sometimes list witnesses or godparents who turn out to be close family members.
Providing more connections.
Exactly. Inconsistencies here might be finding a marriage recorded in a church register, but not found in the civil records. Or maybe a child baptized with a different surname than the known parents, suggesting perhaps an adoption or a different parentage scenario.
What's fascinating here is how these different record types aren't isolated, are they?
Not at all.
They form this kind of web, and pulling on one new thread, like finding that death record, can suddenly illuminate connections generations away.
It's a perfect way to put it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really underscores the importance of a holistic approach to research, doesn't it? Constantly cross-referencing, seeking out new perspectives on the same individuals.
Absolutely. It's about finding all the little threads that connect everything, and then, importantly, knowing what to do with them when they don't quite match up.
So how do you do that when things don't match?
Well, this leads us to a broader strategy,
Yeah.
really. Hypothesis testing. When you encounter an inconsistency, don't just panic or get frustrated. Formulate a new hypothesis.
Okay.
For example, based on that conflicting record, ask, what if Lucy Nelms had a prior marriage? Or, what if Henderson wasn't his biological father? Then you systematically test that hypothesis. You ask, what records would support this new idea? What records would contradict it? This disciplined approach helps you avoid simply dismissing information, and instead uses it as a springboard for deeper, more targeted research.
That's a real shift from just collecting facts to actively doing detective work, like you said earlier.
Absolutely. And another crucial technique here is source correlation and conflict resolution. Because not all sources are created equal, right?
Right, some are better than others.
Exactly. So when you're faced with conflicting evidence, how do you weigh it? Generally, a primary source, like a birth certificate signed by a parent, is preferred over a secondary source, like a family history written decades later by someone else.
Makes sense.
A record created closer in time to the event itself is often more reliable than a memory recorded many, many years later. You need to look for corroborating evidence.
So multiple sources saying the same thing.
Yes. If two independent sources agree on a detail, that detail becomes much stronger. It's about building a preponderance of the evidence, rather than relying on a single, isolated fact, even if it seems solid.
Preponderance of evidence. I like that.
Don't be afraid to maybe create a small table or even a spreadsheet just to compare conflicting data points side by side from different records. Visually seeing the conflict can help.
Good tip. And finally, when you're navigating this maze of potential inconsistencies, I imagine meticulous research logs become even more critical than usual.
Oh, they're absolutely non-negotiable. When you're dealing with inconsistencies, your research log isn't just a list of places you've looked.
It's more than that.
Much more. It becomes a vital tool for tracking what you found, what didn't fit, what questions arose from the conflict, and what new hypotheses you formed. It allows you to track your thought process, avoid redoing work later, and most importantly, document the conflicting evidence itself so you can easily return to it. It's basically your map through the genealogical wilderness.
Okay, now let's take everything we've just discussed. The whole philosophy of embracing inconsistency, the practical strategies of re-examining records, hypothesis testing, and apply it to a concrete, really compelling, real-world example provided by our sources.
Yes, let's dig in.
This is the Olean Nelms Bradford Long case study, and it truly drives home how a single piece of conflicting information can completely reshape decades of research.
It's a perfect illustration of how that one-word record phenomenon we talked about can just turn everything on its head. Let's set the scene first.
Okay.
For 20 years, Research had established an ancestral line involving a couple named Henderson and Lucy Nelms.
Henderson and Lucy Nelms. Got it.
They were consistently found in census records, showing up from 1880 all the way through 1920. So that's 40 years of census data.
Wow. Okay. That continuity across multiple censuses over 4 decades, that seems like it would paint a really clear, unambiguous picture of their family unit, right?
Absolutely. A long, well-documented presence appearing consistently as a family unit in the same area. It sounds like a really solid, well-researched line, something most genealogists would feel very confident about.
Yeah, what was it that made this research feel so solid initially?
Well, just that consistency across multiple federal censuses, that provides a strong sense of validation. You'd see Henderson and Lucy, usually with a similar age range reported, children appearing in one census and then showing up older in the next, all residing in the same general geographic area.
Okay.
This pattern creates a powerful, seemingly irrefutable narrative. And within this established family structure, 2 of their children were identified. Ora Nelms Foster and another individual presumed to be her sister, Oline Nelms.
Okay, so Ora and Olean, presumed sisters, daughters of Henderson and Lucy.
Exactly. This presumption of Oline being the daughter of Henderson and Lucy was based on those decades of consistent census data and probably existing family narratives passed down. This was the established story, the accepted truth for 20 years, a narrative corroborated by multiple historical documents. Okay, so a very firm, long-held belief system. Then comes the unveiling of the discrepancy. Right. Our source says, interestingly, for no apparent reason, a desire to search for this family in Memphis, Tennessee ensued. Isn't that fascinating?
It just goes to show you, sometimes it's intuition, or maybe just casual curiosity, or even just following a random hunch that leads to the biggest breakthroughs. The universe really does sometimes conspire to help you uncover these truths.
That seemingly unapparent reason, that simple desire to just broaden the search geographically, led directly to the pivotal document in this case, Olean Long's death certificate.
Olean Long, so she married a Long.
Yes. Olean, by this point in her life, was a widowed woman, having been married to a George Long. When she died, she was actually living with her sister, Ora Nelms Foster, in Memphis, Tennessee.
Living with her sister, Ora.
Okay, and crucially, Ora was listed as the informant on Olean's death certificate.
Okay, and as we discussed, an informant, especially a sibling like Ora, is generally considered a highly reliable source for family information.
Extremely reliable.
They lived with the person, shared their history, presumably knew their parents from birth. So, if Ora is the informant, whatever she states on that certificate should be taken as incredibly strong evidence, a primary source, really.
Absolutely. Informants are usually the closest surviving relatives, expected to have the most accurate information about intimate family details. So here's where it gets really interesting, because Ora, Olean's sister, gave the name of Sam Bradford as the father of Oline.
Wait, Sam Bradford?
Sam Bradford, not Henderson Nelms.
Whoa, okay, that is a bombshell.
Oh, yeah.
Sam Bradford, not Henderson Nelms, the man listed with her mother Lucy for 40 years in the census.
Exactly.
I can only imagine the shock this must have caused the researcher who had built 20 years of work on the assumption of Henderson being the father. What goes through your mind at that moment?
Oh, that moment is just, it's a mix of disbelief, probably frustration, and then, if you've cultivated that mindset we discussed earlier, pure exhilaration.
Right. The green flag.
It's the gut punch you mentioned, but then immediately followed by that intellectual thrill of knowing you're on the verge of uncovering a deeper, more accurate truth.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is the immediate and dramatic impact this single entry had. It completely shattered a foundational belief that had been supported by decades of census records and family narrative.
Decades of work, potentially.
Right. And this raises that important question for any genealogist.
Yeah.
How do you react when your foundational beliefs, built on so much prior work, are suddenly challenged by a single, highly credible, conflicting source?
Do you dismiss it or do you dive deeper?
Exactly. In this case, the discovery led to the realization, according to the source, that no one knew or admitted that Henderson was not the father of both Ora and Oline.
Wow. Knew or admitted, that adds a whole other layer.
It adds a profound layer of complexity, doesn't it? Suggesting a previously unknown or maybe unadmitted truth within the family's history, perhaps a secret kept, maybe related to stigma back then, or simply a reality that the family chose not to speak of, effectively creating an alternative narrative over time.
That's incredibly powerful. A hidden truth bubbling up after so long. It turns a genealogical problem into a really compelling human story. hinting at complex family dynamics.
Absolutely.
So how did the researcher connect the dots here? Was it just this death certificate that unveiled everything? Or did other sources come into play to clarify this new, startling revelation about Sam Bradford?
This is precisely where the broader family context and the value of looking at related research becomes absolutely paramount. The source explicitly mentions that further context was actually provided in a different publication, My Best Genealogy Tips, Finding Enslaved Ancestors.
Ah, okay. Connecting different research.
Yes, and this is where the crucial connection was made.
Mm,
Lucy Nelms, the presumed mother of Oline,
yeah.
was not only the mother of Oline Bradford Long, but she was also once married to Sam Bradford.
There it is.
There it is. This provides the essential missing piece, transforming what seemed like an irreconcilable discrepancy into a new understanding.
So it wasn't an error on the death certificate.
Not at all. It revealed a much richer and more complex family narrative involving a previous marriage for Lucy. This wasn't just some random name or a pulled out of thin air. There was a genuine, previously unrecorded legal connection between Lucy and this Sam Bradford.
Which means Oline was indeed Lucy's daughter.
Yes.
But with a different father, Sam Bradford. And Henderson Nelms, the man in all those census records with Lucy.
He was actually Oline's stepfather, a very common scenario, of course, in many families, especially in that era, with shorter lifespans and remarriages.
So that clarifies everything. It transforms a confusing contradiction into a coherent, albeit definitely more intricate, family story. It's fascinating how different sources, even ones seemingly outside the immediate family line you're focused on, can illuminate these hidden connections.
Exactly. And the death certificate itself, beyond just revealing the father's name, provided a wealth of specific details that immediately pointed towards further research avenues, basically laying out the next steps for the researcher.
What kind of details?
Well, they were clearly outlined in the source material. First, the name of the decedent was Oline Long, and the source suggested searching the 1940 census and marriage records specifically for her. The 1940 census could confirm her residence with Ora Foster and her status as George Long's widow, corroborating the death certificate's immediate context.
Right, validating the current situation.
And marriage records for Oline and George Long would provide further details about her life, maybe her age at marriage, potentially her parents again.
Okay.
Second, the name of the father was Sam Bradford. This immediately prompted a search of census and death records specifically for him. The goal would be to find Sam Bradford in earlier censuses, maybe even find him listed with Lucy Nelms before her marriage to Henderson,
Looking for that connection.
or locate his own death record to learn more about his parents or birthplace, further solidifying this new paternal line. Third, the name of the mother was listed as Lucy Nelms. This confirms the mother, but now the research focus for Lucy shifts to her marital history, looking for a marriage record between Lucy and Sam Bradford first, and then later between Lucy and Henderson Nelms.
Finding both marriages.
Fourth, the informant was confirmed as Ora Foster, also identified as Oline's sister. This just reiterates the strength of the evidence, having a close relative provide this vital information. The researcher might also then seek out Ora Foster's own death record or census entries, if available, to see if they corroborate details about her parents, or perhaps even mention her sister Oline.
Cross-referencing the siblings. Good idea.
And fifth, critically, the cemetery was listed as Norfolk in Walls, DeSoto County, Mississippi.
Norfolk Cemetery, Walls, Mississippi. Okay. What's fascinating here is how these seemingly mundane details, right, just administrative data on a form,
Yeah, names, places.
suddenly become critical threads in this genealogical tapestry. Each one is a potential key to unlocking a new door in the research.
Indeed. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see how multiple sources, the death certificate, the prior census records that now need reinterpreting, and even a completely different book like My Best Genealogy Tips, all work together to clarify a complex situation.
Get synergy.
It really is. This isn't just about a name change on a chart. It's about uncovering an entirely different family narrative, revealing a previous marriage for Lucy, and expanding our whole understanding of the family's journey through time. It moves beyond just names and dates to reveal the underlying human stories, the complexities of family life in that era, and maybe the careful choices people made about what to reveal and what to keep private.
So once this bombshell hits, finding Sam Bradford as the father, what's the very next step? Do you just accept it and start adding him to the tree?
No, not at all. You can't just jump to conclusions. Even with strong evidence like this, the source is very clear. These types of inconsistency cause you to have to begin all over again, searching for other possible missed clues, and that is what will be done in this case.
Begin all over again. Wow.
Well, maybe not literally all over, but it requires a significant reevaluation. It isn't seen as a defeat. It's a necessary new starting point. It's an imperative to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about this branch of the family tree through this new lens.
So you'd go back through all the old records again?
Meticulously. Go back through all the existing records, looking for any other subtle clues that might have been overlooked before because they simply didn't fit the previous Henderson as father narrative. Then you'd initiate completely new searches, specifically targeting Sam Bradford, his connections to Lucy, maybe where he lived, and any other children they might have had together.
And the guiding principle here is crucial, as the source states. Our research must be validated or invalidated and not just overlooked.
Exactly.
You can't just ignore it because it messes up your nice, neat family tree. It's about diligent follow-through, even when the truth is inconvenient or disrupts your existing findings.
Precisely. And in this particular case, one of those vital clues from the death certificate that turned out to be incredibly significant was the fortuitous revelation of the cemetery. Norfolk, in Walls, DeSoto County, Mississippi.
Okay, you mentioned that was critical. Why is that specific location, Walls, Mississippi, so important here?
Because Walls, Mississippi was identified as the birthplace of her formerly enslaved mother, Lucy.
Wow. Okay, that adds a lot.
It adds immense historical and personal depth to the discovery. It's not just a random place on a map anymore. It connects Olene directly to her mother's origins, a birthplace tied to the painful and complex history of slavery in the U.S. For researchers of African-American genealogy, discovering a specific birthplace for an enslaved ancestor is often a monumental breakthrough because records identifying individuals before emancipation can be incredibly scarce.
Right, finding that location is huge.
And if Walls was indeed Lucy's birthplace, then Norfolk, the cemetery mentioned on Olene's death certificate, could very well be the family burial ground.
A family burial ground.
Yes. This points towards a physical place where generations of this family, potentially including previously enslaved ancestors like Lucy herself, might be laid to rest. It offers potentially physical, tangible connections to their history that might have otherwise been lost.
That's a profound connection to make just from a name on a death certificate. So, if the researcher now knows Walls, Mississippi was the birthplace of Lucy, an enslaved woman, what kinds of records or research avenues would they now pursue that they maybe wouldn't thought of before, and what challenges would that present?
Okay, yeah, this opens up a whole new, often challenging, but incredibly rewarding avenue of research, focusing specifically on African-American genealogy pre-1865 in DeSoto County, Mississippi, and the surrounding areas.
What kind of records are we talking about?
You'd be looking at slave schedules first. These are census records from 1850 and 1860 that listed enslaved individuals, but usually only by age, sex, and color under the enslaver's name, not by their own names.
So you need to know the enslaver.
Exactly. The researcher would need to identify potential enslavers in or around Walls, perhaps based on where Henderson and Lucy lived later, or other clues, and then meticulously search their slave schedules for individuals matching Lucy's presumed age and demographics.
That sounds tough.
It is. Then you'd look at probate records of enslavers. Wills, estate inventories, estate sales documents. These often listed enslaved people by name, sometimes even in family groupings. This is a critical source for connecting enslaved individuals to specific enslaver families.
Okay.
Deed books might also contain records of sales of enslaved people, recorded just like property sales. If the enslaver was part of a large plantation, their private plantation records, if they survive, might contain birth, death, or even marriage details for the enslaved individuals.
If you can find them.
Right. Then, post-Civil War, you have the Freedmen's Bureau records. These are invaluable things like labor contracts, marriage certificates issued to newly freed couples, ration lists. They can provide crucial links between pre- and post-emancipation lives and identities.
Those sound key.
And maybe church records, especially for early African-American churches established after the war. Baptismal and membership records might exist.
And the challenges here are pretty significant, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. Surnames often change or are adopted formally only after emancipation. Records are scarce, scattered, or non-existent. And the focus in many antebellum records is, unfortunately, on the enslaver, not the enslaved individual. It requires piecing together fragmented evidence, often relying on indirect clues and a lot of careful analysis.
And confirming Norfolk as the family burial ground.
That would involve looking for cemetery deeds, contacting local historical societies in DeSoto County, searching online cemetery databases, or even, if possible, physically visiting the cemetery to look for other Nelms or Bradford burials or related families.
So what does this all mean for us listening to this story? It means that even a huge wrench in your research, something that seems to invalidate years of work, can actually lead you to incredibly significant and deeply personal connections, like understanding the birthplace of an enslaved ancestor, potentially finding a family burial ground where generations lie. It's truly a journey of profound discovery, isn't it? Even when it's messy and leads you down paths you never, ever anticipated.
That really is the essence of robust, meaningful genealogical research. And the case study concludes by reiterating that commitment we talked about. No matter where these clues lead, the researcher's interpretation will be shared, as well as all evidence, conflicting or otherwise.
Right. Share everything.
You present all the evidence, even the uncomfortable bits that contradict, along with your interpretation, allowing others to see your reasoning, maybe challenge it, and potentially build upon your findings in the future.
It's about building a robust and honest historical record, isn't it? Not just a clean, convenient family tree that makes us feel good. It's about embracing the real complexity of human lives. Hashtag outro. Wow, what an incredible journey we've taken you on today. From seeing those, annoying inconsistencies in your family history as problems.
Roadblocks.
Yeah, roadblocks, to hopefully now embracing them as absolutely pivotal clues. We use that powerful real-world example of Olean's true parentage, unearthed through that single conflicting death certificate,
That one piece of paper.
to show just how transformative these moments can be. They don't just change a name on a chart, they can completely rewrite a family's narrative, opening doors to previously hidden histories like Lucy's origins.
The core message today is really clear. Genealogical research is a dynamic, ongoing process. It's not about finding static, irrefutable facts and then just being done with it.
They're not checking boxes.
Exactly. The most compelling family stories, the ones that truly connect us to the struggles and triumphs of our ancestors, often emerge not from those perfectly aligned records, but from the messy human inconsistencies that force us to dig deeper, to question, and to reevaluate our assumptions. So embrace the unknown, the surprises, and that need for reevaluation.
So, as you reflect on your own family history, maybe there's a line you thought was finished, or perhaps a story you've always just taken for granted. Ask yourself, what surprising wrench might be waiting to be discovered in a record you haven't looked at in years? What irrefutable fact might actually be waiting to reveal a richer, more complex truth about your progenitors? A truth that could connect you to parts of your past you never even imagined.
What new stories might it unlock?
Yeah. What new stories about your ancestors might it unlock? And what unexpected connections might you find if you simply allow yourself the freedom to question the narrative you thought you knew and really follow where the evidence truly leads, even if it's uncomfortable?
Embrace that feeling of doubt when it comes up. Follow those conflicting clues and let the historical records lead you, even when they seem to be pulling you in really unexpected directions. The most rewarding discoveries are often found way off the beaten path.
Keep digging, keep questioning, and keep enjoying the deep dive into your own incredible histories. We'll see you next time.